I never thought I'd find home in the smell of hay and horse sweat. But there I was at 28, standing in the middle of a stable in rural Montana, watching the most beautiful man I'd ever seen gentle a newborn foal with hands that moved like poetry. His name was Ethan, and he was the kind of person who made you believe in second chances just by existing in your vicinity. I'd come to Clearwater Ranch 3 months earlier, running from a life that had stopped fitting somewhere around my 3rd year at a corporate law firm in Seattle. The breakdown had been spectacular in its ordinariness. No dramatic meltdown in court, no public scene, just me, sitting in my corner office on a Tuesday afternoon, staring at a contract worth $500,000 and realizing I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything at all. The words on the page swam together. My hands started shaking, and then I was in my car driving east with no plan, no destination, just this desperate need to find something real. The ranch had a small guest cottage they rented out. Nothing fancy, just a place where I could breathe and figure out what came next. I'd imagined I'd spend my days hiking and reading, maybe learning to cook something more complicated than takeout. I hadn't expected to become completely transfixed by the stable hand who showed up every morning at dawn, moving through his work with a quiet competence that made my chest ache in ways I didn't quite understand yet. Ethan was 32, though he had the kind of face that could have been anywhere from 25 to 40, all strong lines and sun-weathered skin. He'd grown up on ranches, he told me later, moving from Montana to Wyoming to Colorado, following work and seasons and his own restless need to keep moving. He wore his brown hair a little too long, always pulled back in a small bun at the nape of his neck, and his eyes were this impossible shade of hazel that shifted between green and gold depending on the light. I started volunteering at the stables in my 2nd week, mostly because I was going stir-crazy in the cottage, and partly because I'd catch myself watching Ethan work from my window every morning like some kind of creep. He'd look surprised when I offered to help, sizing me up with those careful eyes, taking in my expensive hiking boots and my soft lawyer hands. "You ever worked with horses before?" he'd asked, his voice low and measured, with just a hint of amusement. "No," I'd admitted. "But I'm a quick learner and I need something to do with my hands." He'd studied me for another long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll start you on mucking stalls. If you can handle that for a week without complaining, we'll see about letting you near the actual animals." I'd handled it. Barely. Those first few days my back screamed, my arms ached, and I discovered muscles I didn't know existed. But there was something meditative about the work. Something that quieted the constant anxiety that had been my companion for the last 5 years. And there was Ethan, always nearby, occasionally offering a correction or a word of encouragement in that quiet way of his. We fell into an easy rhythm. I'd show up at 6, help with the morning feeding and stall cleaning, then spend a few hours learning the basics of horse care under Ethan's patient instruction. He had this way of teaching that never made me feel stupid, even when I was doing something completely wrong. He'd just step in close, his hand covering mine on the brush or the lead rope, and guide me through the correct motion. "Horses can sense nervousness," he told me one morning as I stood frozen in front of a massive bay gelding named Thunder. "They're prey animals, so they're always reading the energy around them. You need to find your calm center before you approach." "What if I don't have a calm center?" I'd asked, only half joking. He'd smiled then, this small private thing that made my heart skip. "Everyone's got one. You just got to remember where you left it." I started finding mine in those early morning hours, in the simple repetitive tasks, in the warm breath of horses against my palm, in the quiet presence of a man who seemed to understand that sometimes people needed space to figure out their own thoughts. We didn't talk much at first. Ethan wasn't the chatty type, and I was still too raw, too confused about what I was doing with my life to make much small talk. But silence with him never felt awkward. It felt companionable, like we were both just existing in the same space, finding our own peace in the work. It was about 6 weeks in when things started to shift. We were in the tack room, and I was attempting to properly clean a saddle under his supervision. My hands were clumsy with the leather soap, and I kept missing spots. "Here," he said, moving behind me, his chest nearly touching my back as he reached around to guide my hands. "You got to work it in circles. Feel the leather. Let it tell you where it needs attention." I couldn't breathe, not because he was restricting my air, but because suddenly I was hyper-aware of every point where his body nearly touched mine. The warmth radiating off him, the smell of him that was part soap and part something earthier, more fundamental. My hands stilled under his. "You okay?" he asked, his voice close to my ear. "Yeah," I managed, just concentrating. He stepped back and I could breathe again, but something had shifted. I'd felt the slight hesitation before he moved away, the way his hands had lingered just a fraction too long. Or maybe I was imagining it. Maybe this was just me, projecting my own confused feelings onto a man who was just being kind to a lost city boy playing at ranch life. But then I'd catch him watching me sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd glance up from whatever task I was doing and find his eyes on me, his expression unreadable but intense. He'd always look away quickly, return to his work, but it kept happening. The ranch owners, Martha and Bill, were in their 60s and treated Ethan like a son. They'd been thrilled when one of their mares, a beautiful dapple gray named Moonlight, turned out to be pregnant. The breeding had been intentional, a chance to add to their small but quality herd, and everyone was excited about the foal. I was there the night she went into labor. It was late March, still cold at night, and I'd been in the cottage trying to read when Ethan knocked on my door. He was breathless, his hair loose around his shoulders for once. "Moonlight's in labor," he said. "Thought you might want to see this." I grabbed my jacket and followed him through the dark to the barn. Martha and Bill were already there, and the vet was on her way, but Ethan said everything looked normal, that Moonlight was doing great. We settled in to wait, speaking in whispers so as not to disturb the laboring mare. Birth is messy and primal and absolutely beautiful. I watched Ethan work alongside the vet when she arrived, his hands sure and gentle, murmuring encouragement to Moonlight in that low voice of his. And when the foal finally came, slipping into the world in a rush of fluid and membrane, I felt tears on my cheeks and didn't bother to hide them. The foal was a colt, dark bay like his father, with a perfect white star on his forehead. He was gangly and confused, trying to figure out his legs while Moonlight cleaned him with long, loving strokes of her tongue. "He's perfect," Martha said, her own voice thick with emotion. We stayed for hours, making sure the colt could stand and nurse, that Moonlight was recovering well. It was nearly 4 in the morning when Martha and Bill finally headed back to the house, and the vet packed up her things. Ethan and I remained sitting on hay bales outside the stall, watching the new family in comfortable silence. "Thank you for coming to get me," I said finally. "Figured you'd earned it," he replied. "You've been working hard these past weeks. You're not half bad with the horses now." "High praise," I said with a smile. He laughed softly. "I don't give compliments I don't mean." We sat there a while longer, and I found myself studying his profile in the dim barn light. There was something about him that made me feel settled, grounded in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He turned to look at me. "Sure." "Why do you do this? The ranch work, I mean. It's hard, the pay can't be great, and you're always moving around." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes back on the horses. "It's honest work," he said finally. "And I'm good at it. Some people need to be around other people to feel alive. I need to be around animals, around growing things. Out here, everything makes sense in a way the rest of the world never has for me." I understood that more than he knew. "What about you?" he asked. "What are you running from?" "That obvious? People don't usually give up high-paying jobs to muck stalls unless they're running from something." I told him then about the law firm, the panic attacks, the feeling of being trapped in a life I'd built but never actually wanted. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or advice. "Sometimes you gotta tear everything down before you can build something real," was all he said. The sun was starting to rise when we finally left the barn. We walked back toward the cottage together, neither of us in a hurry despite our exhaustion. "Get some sleep," Ethan said when we reached my door. "You've earned a day off." "What about you?" "I'll sleep later. Want to keep an eye on them for a bit longer." Of course he did. I watched him walk back toward the barn, his silhouette growing smaller in the dawn light, and felt something in my chest crack open. Over the next few days, I spent every spare moment at the barn, watching the colt discover the world. He was bold and curious, all legs and enthusiasm, and completely enchanting. Ethan was never far away, monitoring both mother and baby with careful attention. "He needs a name," Martha said on the third day. She was leaning against the stall door, watching the colt prance around. "We usually let whoever's been most involved with the birth do the honors." She looked at Ethan, but he shook his head. "This one's different," he said, and his eyes found mine. "I think our newest ranch hand should have the privilege." I stared at him. "Me, but I didn't do anything." "You were there," he said simply. "And you've been here every day since, helping. It feels right." Martha smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea." The responsibility felt enormous. Names mattered, especially for horses who might carry them for 30 years or more. I spent the rest of the day thinking about it, watching the colt, trying to find something that fit. That evening, I found Ethan in the barn doing a final check before bed. The colt was nursing, and Moonlight looked content and proud. "I think I have a name," I told him. "Yeah?" He turned to face me, giving me his full attention in that way he had. "Phoenix," I said, "because he feels like a new beginning, like hope." Ethan's expression softened, and for a moment I thought I saw something vulnerable flash across his face. "Phoenix," he repeated. "I like that. I like that a lot." We stood there in the quiet barn, just the two of us and the horses, and something unspoken hung in the air between us. I'd been trying not to name what I was feeling, trying not to acknowledge the way my heart raced when Ethan was near, the way I found excuses to be around him, the way I'd started to notice the shape of his hands and the curve of his mouth. I'd known I was gay since college, had even had a few relationships, though nothing serious. My last boyfriend had been 3 years ago, another lawyer who'd eventually gotten tired of how much I worked. But this felt different. This felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and necessary. "Ethan," I started, not sure what I was going to say. He took a step closer, a step. We were inches apart now, and I could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the way his pupils dilated slightly as he looked at me. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. "And if I'm reading this wrong, just say so and we'll forget it ever happened." My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it. "Okay. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he said. "Since that first day when you showed up wanting to work, with your fancy boots and your sad eyes, I've been trying to keep my distance, trying to be professional, but God, you make it hard." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "I know you're figuring things out," he continued. "I know you might not be staying, that this might just be a temporary stop for you. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest." "I'm gay," I blurted out, because apparently that was what my brain decided was the most important information to share in this moment. He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Yeah, I figured that out. Question is, are you interested? Because I've been dying to kiss you for weeks now, and if you tell me you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, I'm going to do something about it." "Yes," I said. "God, yes." He kissed me then, one hand cupping my face while the other settled on my hip, pulling me closer. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, like he was giving me room to change my mind. But I pressed into him, my hands finding their way to his hair, and the kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate and absolutely perfect. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I was really hoping you'd say that." I laughed, giddy and overwhelmed. "I've been half in love with you since you taught me how to curry a horse." "Only half," he teased. "Didn't want to presume?" We kissed again, slower this time, learning the taste and feel of each other. Behind us, Phoenix whinnied softly, as if offering his approval, and we broke apart laughing. "Come back to my place?" Ethan asked. He lived in a small cabin on the ranch property, bigger than my cottage, but still modest. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." His cabin was exactly what I'd expected. Simple, clean, with evidence of his life scattered around in the form of horsebooks and worn jeans and photographs of ranches he'd worked. We didn't make it far past the door before we were kissing again. Urgent now, weeks of tension finally finding release. We stumbled toward his bedroom, shedding clothes as we went, and fell onto his bed in a tangle of limbs. Being with him felt like coming home, like every touch was both brand new and deeply familiar. He was patient and passionate, attentive in ways that made me feel cherished. And when we finally lay spent and wrapped around each other, I felt more at peace than I had in years. "Stay," he murmured against my hair. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. We fell asleep like that, and woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the realization that we'd overslept. We rushed through showers and coffee, grinning at each other like teenagers, and made it to the barn only slightly late. Martha took one look at us and smiled knowingly, but didn't comment. Over the following weeks, we fell into a new rhythm, one that included stolen kisses in empty stalls and nights spent at his cabin, learning each other's bodies and histories and dreams. Phoenix grew stronger every day, his personality emerging as bold and sweet and everything good. I loved watching Ethan work with him, seeing the gentleness and expertise he brought to every interaction, and I loved that I'd been given the honor of naming him, this creature who represented new beginnings for all of us. My temporary stay at the ranch became permanent. I picked up more responsibilities, learned more skills, and discovered I had a real aptitude for this work. Martha and Bill started talking about me staying on long term, maybe even buying into the ranch eventually. The life I'd left behind in Seattle felt like it belonged to someone else, some previous version of me who hadn't yet learned what it meant to be truly alive. On a warm evening in late May, Ethan and I sat on the fence watching Phoenix play in the pasture, his dark coat gleaming in the golden hour light. "You know what I love about horses?" Ethan said. "They live completely in the present. No regrets about yesterday, no anxiety about tomorrow, just this moment, right here." I leaned into him, his arm coming around my shoulders. "I'm learning that." "Good," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple, "because I plan on making a lot of moments with you worth being present for." Phoenix galloped past us, all joy and energy, and I thought about how much had changed in just a few months. I'd come here broken, running from a life that was killing me slowly, with no idea what I was looking for. And I'd found it anyway, in the most unexpected place, with a man who'd taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself start over. "I love you," I said, the words feeling natural and right. Ethan turned to look at me, his hazel eyes soft. "I love you too. Have for a while now." We kissed there on the fence as the sun set over the Montana hills, and somewhere nearby, Phoenix whinnied his approval. This was home now, these mountains and horses and this man beside me. This was the life I'd been too afraid to imagine I deserved. And it had all started because a stable hand let me name a foal, let me into his world, and taught me what it meant to finally be myself.